You can bring global technology to the country, but you have to adapt it to the specific needs and challenges of applications associated with the Indian context to reinvent the wheel. Because as you rightly said, it would take much deeper engagement and much significant investments. At the end of it, you are just recreating what's already done elsewhere.
In the case of lithium-ion battery, is that going to continue in India? The hold on the technology will be always with the foreign player?
I don't think India will continue to ride on technology created elsewhere, but that's the entry point.
So if you can let us know about overall plan by considering one is the scale, second more important part is the battery chemistry. And what form factors you are?
Pretty confident that the efforts that we are going in now will allow us to build both cylindrical and prismatic product portfolio in NMC as well as LFP chemistry,
Right.
taking us close to about 20 gigawatt hour in the next 4-5 years.
Why there are some gaps when policymakers make the policy and what industry actually requires?
Was the technology matrix looking at cells or the products that will complement a two-wheeler, three-wheeler applications, which is where FAME subsidy was going? Was the technology of the cells defined they were going into, let's say, bus segment, which is where the FAME subsidy was going? Felt that they were not complementing each other. If they are looking at buying a locally made cell for cost benefit, it's unlikely to happen for some time. India need to invest on processing capability.
Welcome to today's podcast, wherein we delve into India's heart of clean mobility transformation. Today, I have Mr. Vijayanand Samudrala, who is the CEO and President of Amara Raja Advanced Cell Technologies, with me to go and have a deeper discussion about energy as well as the battery, in particular the lithium-ion battery status in India. Thank you very much, Vijayanandji, for agreeing and coming on my show.
Thank you, Pritesh, for having me here on the show, and huge compliments for you for starting this initiative. I've had the opportunity to watch some of your episodes, and it's really very enlightening.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank
to be
you
here.
very much, sir. I think it's very much encouraging for me. So to begin with, I was doing some reading before coming for the show and preparing anyway for the session. And I understood that when Amara Raja, obviously one of the largest lead-acid battery manufacturers in India, when EV discussions started happening around 2012-13, obviously your company also started, tracking the industry. And going back, I think the name of the company was only related to the batteries. Then it became energy and mobility. And I think the company, the subsidiary which you are heading, is particularly for advanced cell technologies. So what is the thought behind, this kind of a transformation? Is it like need for the industry to not particularly focusing on only product segment, but become kind of an energy solution provider? Because if you look at even automotive OEMs globally as well as in India, they are also kind of transforming into as an energy company, not purely automotive. So let's start from there.
Sure. Your question brings memories back to me that late 90s, when we were having a leadership communication meetings, one of the objectives is to have learning sessions.
Yeah.
And I was given a task to present to the management and leadership team at the time. I'm talking about late 90s,
Right.
almost like 25 years ago. To learn a little more about what's really happening in the electric mobility around the world.
In
Around
90s.
in 1999 or so. So there was a 1-hour session where I did a lot of research, and that's when I realized actually electric mobility precedes IC engine.
Yeah.
The whole the vehicle system started with the battery operated. Those days, probably the battery technology available at that time is very, very premature kind of thing. As a large battery manufacturer, we have built an ecosystem for the lead acid technology and the global scale manufacturing facilities to address the critical needs of what's happening in India. And we very clearly realize that you can bring global technology to the country, but you have to adapt it to the specific needs and challenges of applications associated with the Indian context.
Right.
And when we started maturing those products and the manufacturing processes, we realized that those products seem to be a good fit for markets outside India as well, where the challenge of application is much more rigorous. So we kept on watching how the lithium technology and the other advanced battery technologies are evolving around the world. the digital instruments, digital devices has actually triggered demand for lightweight, fast charging kind of requirement on the battery technology. And the lithium started creeping into the computing devices, where is the mobile phone, digital camera, laptops, and things like that. But those market in India for manufacturers was limited for a long period of time.
Yeah.
While we were consumers of these devices,
Right.
the manufacturing ecosystem did not evolve in India.
Right.
And typically whether it's a renewable sector or you take the battery technology, you can be, venturing early enough, but if you don't have the wherewithal to stay focused and stay put there, you can burn out faster.
Yeah.
And Indian economy was enabling our lead acid business to grow, very, very significantly. So the energies, the resources, the bandwidth of the company and the management was focused on ensuring that growth is, fully leveraged. But somebody inside the organization responsible for technological initiatives, me and my team was, closely following it up and learning what's happening globally. That's around 2016-17 when actually I became CEO of the listed entity at that point of time, the Amara Raja Batteries Limited. We presented a proposal to the board to set up a R&D facility inside the organization so that our teams can start soiling their hands, understand what goes into a lithium cell and what are the dynamics associated with the technology. And incidentally, that's the time you see that there is a policy discussion happening about sustainable mobility in the country.
Right.
Just a clear understanding here. There is certain market that's already existing for battery technologies, largely made by lead acid.
Yeah.
But the moment you have the electric traction and electric mobility applications started becoming bigger and bigger, lead acid was found wanting on its performance characteristics. So you had to have an advanced technology.
Right.
Same thing when you look at the renewable energy component in the overall power basket going up, energy storage required a different kind of performance characteristics on the battery side. So you are now having two different market segments that are being created.
Right.
So we never looked at lithium as an alternative to lead acid, but the lithium as a solution to address two new market segments that were created. I think the timing around 2017-18 to start dwelling deeper into that, start making commitments to financial resources, people resources into that was appropriate. And I was actively engaged with the forums that were hosted by the government, policy making bodies, where this conversation became more and more intense. That's how the segue happened into this sector for us.
That's great. And obviously, I mean, everybody had a lot of hope from traditional manufacturers because it was understood well that until or unless companies like Amara Raja and Exide, really come into lithium-ion battery manufacturing, obviously, it's not, that easy task actually to do. You mentioned about R&D, which you started in 2016-17, right? So I want to go a little deeper and understand what was the need of R&D setup, because when I understand from my research is that if you really want to develop the lithium and battery technology, it's at least a decade task, and maybe a traditional manufacturer has limited time to enter into the market. So was the technology development was focus for you for R&D, or exploring how to go about the entire ecosystem?
I think very, very apt question. So let me first address the issue of legacy battery players moving into lithium as a specific topic. Globally, if you list down top 10 lead acid battery manufacturers, India has at least two of them, Amara Raja being one of them. And today, if you look at how many of them are deep into lithium, I think you would have to probably pick one or two people, mostly, a couple of them from China. That doesn't mean that other lead acid players have not handled the lithium technology as an area of research interest and certain level of prototyping. I know few Japanese companies did that. And specifically speaking about Panasonic sold their lead acid business and then significantly moved into lithium, a couple of decades ago. So there is no established case study of
Okay.
a large lead-acid battery manufacturer
Okay.
moving
Interesting.
significantly into lithium.
Yeah.
So that way, I'm proud that the two large manufacturers in India have
Yeah.
significantly invested into building a lithium ecosystem in India. Second question on the research side that you talked about,
Mhm.
our effort was that, yeah, we are not trying to reinvent the wheel because, as you rightly said, it would take much deeper engagement and much significant investments. At the end of it, you are just recreating what's already done elsewhere. You're lagging behind on time. But even if you were to absorb technology, that's matured elsewhere, you got to be a good student.
Right.
And our effort was to socialize, familiarize, and soil our hands to understand what's the fundamentals of this lithium chemistry is,
Right.
and more importantly, what will work in the Indian context. So there's a bit of application-oriented understanding that we were seeking in how do we apply lithium technology to the Indian applications, Indian markets.
Right. This is very much my personal opinion, not based on any research or any data backing. But when I try to understand the capability of tier one manufacturers in India, and when there is a value proposition which you ask them, really, obviously technology development has been the focus area, but generally outside companies have been coming with the technology, and then the Indian player has market access, much more understanding of the local ecosystem, connections with the clients, obviously putting investments, land issues, state and central government relationships, etc. So that is the value proposition mostly they have been bringing. That's why you don't see any common rail injection system being invented by any Indian company. And larger tier one companies from Germany, Japan, Korea have been always, trying to bring the technology and leverage the market. Now, in the case of lithium-ion battery, is that going to continue in India? The hold on the technology will be always with the foreign player, or sometime in future, Indian companies also going to kind of contribute in terms of technology development? Is just my initial question to you.
I think lithium technology and other chemistries in the advanced battery technologies is an evolving phenomenon.
Yeah.
We have seen over the last 10 years significant changes happening in that.
Right.
And I think that process will continue.
Mm-hmm.
Where does India catch up on that
Yeah.
and start building an ecosystem of creating certain technological solutions
Mm-hmm.
that would be built in India? So I don't think India will continue to ride on technology created elsewhere, but that's the entry point.
Yeah.
You don't want to go back and start reinventing the whole wheel, as I mentioned earlier. You join the bandwagon at a level where state-of-the-art technology is what you bring into the country, industrialize it locally, adapt it responsibly for the specific requirements of Indian applications. But from there, you start building self-sufficiency in creating solutions that will address, in my view, there are 4 things that a battery should do. A good battery should do 4 things. It should be lighter in weight. It should be faster in getting charged.
Yeah.
It should last longer. It should cost optimal. I wouldn't call cheaper, so coming from the supply chain, but it should create value for the user. On these 4 fronts, you will see that the boundaries are getting pushed. So at some point of time, India will have to take lead on creating those solutions that will push the boundary in our own way. It could be moving away from, let's say, critically difficult material to come to a chemistry that is de-risking the supply chain.
Right.
It could be about reprocessing and recycling technologies that India has to innovate around. I think there are clearly white spaces available in this that India can focus and build our own expertise on that.
Yeah, that's encouraging to understand. And just bringing this, choosing the keyword which you mentioned, 4 keywords, I think cost part. Obviously, I think in longer term, India has to be cost competitive when volume increases at least. But given the overcapacity, developed in other parts of the world, do you think Indian cell manufacturers, once they start, at commercial level, can be at par to the cost what we are getting from outside as of now? Because it's a interesting, right? Even if you have a local manufacturing, generally the tendency in Indian manufacturers would be going to somebody who is, good technology, supply chain stability as well as cost.
Yeah.
Uh,
Uh,
or Indian OEMs should think about longer period of time, and cost can be one of the thing on which they should be a little flexible.
I think this is a very involved topic. So let me break it down into a couple of areas.
Right.
If you look at the automotive, let's pick up the automotive sector
Yeah.
to start with. I'll bring in a couple of other sectors for reference here. But if you take automotive sector, 25 years ago or maybe 30 years ago, we had very limited number of vehicle models being made in India.
Yes.
The capacity of vehicle manufacturing was very limited.
Yeah.
And while the initial auto revolution happened with this Maruti Suzuki coming together and creating a Indian focused vehicle, the real transformation started happening when Hyundai came into India and had a local car manufacturing facility that grew into its own strength.
Yeah.
But if you look at the component ecosystem in the automotive side, I think over the period, and I witnessed it in the 2.5 decades that I was closely associated with, over the period, the component ecosystem got stronger and stronger and stronger across the value chain. The design capability, the manufacturing capability, the supply chain management, the innovation required for the vehicle. Yes, a lot of global companies participated in that process. A lot of Indian-based corporate houses have joined that movement. And today, if I keep the EV piece aside and look at the ICE piece alone, I think the component ecosystem, where there are certain technological complexity involved, we have become reasonably strong in that thing. And we earn significant export revenue as well there. I think we need to give ourselves time to build a similar kind of competency on the electric powertrains as well. There are certain strategic material challenges that we face that need to be resolved. But fundamentally, from an industrialization perspective, from a manufacturing perspective, and as we go along from technology development perspective, India will gain competitive strength. OEs will have to be patient with that, and they will have to invest partially into that and work with the proven supply base that's there and new supply base that may come into this, rather than just looking at how competitive are we today. If you have taken that view 30 years ago, I don't think we would have had a very robust component ecosystem evolved in the country.
Right.
While that's a generic approach, and that's true with consumer electronics, you see a lot of make in India traction happening in consumer devices, mobile phone assembly. We talk about mobile phone assembly adding maybe 15% of the last mile value. But then what is the next stage in the semiconductor and electronic manufacturing systems? You see that we are creeping up that value of 15% local value addition to ideally get up to at least 40% plus. So we'll have to see that roadmap created, and we are as Amara Raja, and we are very closely associated with that ecosystem as a critical stakeholder. I think the challenge for us would be that if you take a snapshot view and look at the pricing dynamics globally today, there are tactical reasons why the prices are what they are today, and they may not be fully sustainable in the long run for everybody. Yes, few companies might be able to continue to dominate that globally, and we have to probably kind of demystify that element of cost structuring in the value chain. We have to give ourselves probably at least a decade for us to be able to say that India has arrived as a competitive manufacturing force in the sustainable mobility segment.
Can you please elaborate on that tactical pricing and a little more why?
Pritesh, as I said, Amara Raja got into this way back in 16, 17, more to familiarize ourselves. But around a little before COVID time is where we were seriously contemplating of investment into this sector, and we knew the investment is going to be significantly large. Then COVID came, and COVID disrupted many of the strategic thought processes across various segments. And post-COVID, we saw a significant uptick of the EV, focus around the world. Then we started putting financial models around what will work, what's the scale at which it will work, what's the investment at it will work, what is the cost matrix going to look like, what's the pricing dynamics.
Right.
If you've looked at 30 months ago, many of the strategic companies, companies that advise on management strategy and business strategy, would have been looking at cell price curve by 2030, what's that number going to look like?
$100 by 2030.
Yeah, and I remember one of the McKinsey reports said $67 per kilowatt hour way back in 22, 23. And I said, wow, that's pretty aggressive. How are we going to get there? Right? Because we had a cost model and we were looking at how will the cost come down? Cost will come down because of improved material efficiency. That means you are able to get more out of the same quantity of material. Cost will come down because you are enhancing the life of the product. Cost will come down because your manufacturing conversion cost is going to becoming more efficient with improved process technologies. We knew these things and there was a model created around that. But if you now take what's the price that we are talking about on per kilowatt hour and try to rationalize with this cost-based modeling, I see a significant delta. The cost-based modeling throws up some number based on what's happening on the cost structure. But when you look at the finished product price, there is a significant delta, which I believe is a tactical pricing today. Like you said, overcapacity, significant inventory in the system, consolidation happening around the globe, particularly in China. So these are the things that seem to be driving the cost behavior of the cell. So once we pass through this phase, and as the maturity happens globally on the supply
Generally,
chain.
how long is this phase, sir?
Well, I think that would be like crystal ball gazing, but I would say that in about 2 to 3 years, as capacity starts appearing elsewhere in the world beyond Korea and China, we should see some kind of maturity and stability on the cost models and its relationship to the pricing.
Right. In one of my previous sessions, I was talking to Vikram Handaji, the president of Epsilon Group. And, he actually mentioned these points that, for example, for him, it took approximately 4 or 5 years to qualify a customer. So many, changes, requirements, and, understanding, learnings from both the sides. And if customer only compares the cost, obviously they will, right? Because they also have a pressure. Customer means a battery company. Then if they don't get orders, it's a actually long-term challenge for a battery company only. So obviously a battery company can, let's say, buy 80% of their requirement from outside, wherever they are getting it at more cost-effective prices, but maybe 10-15% capacity can be created in India. So that's how you also have an alternate supplier. And that is true for their global customers as well as customers in India, I'm sure companies like yours. So that is the reason I was trying to get your perspective also, but I'm very, very clear now. And he also mentioned about, like, for example, the graphite facility, which he's putting graphite based anodes, is it's very small as of now, but that too the largest out of China. So now they're, I think, building more capacity and going very aggressive in future. My next question to you, because now...
Yeah, before we move on, I just want to acknowledge the tremendous work being done by the Epsilon Advanced Materials team.
Right.
We work with them, and Vikram has been doing an exceptional job. The great thing about Vikram's idea here is he's not restricting himself to based on Indian market opportunity.
Yes.
He's looking at creating a supply chain that could be an option for customers to think beyond China.
Right.
He's looking at setting up the project in Finland and then US. So that global perspective is what's going to make it work for Vikram and Epsilon.
I'm not sure whether it was a strategic decision by considering what is happening now, but his decision of putting the facility in United States and looking at the current tax structure, tariff status, and other things, it's very much favorable for them.
Absolutely. and he also strongly believed that eventually India has to build its own supply chain.
Yeah, that's really so. Customer qualification, I was discussing with him, and I think that is true also for a company like yours, like for a battery manufacturer as well. You might also have to qualify a customer. So in case of like anode-based, graphite-based anodes, for a new company, it took 5 years. Generally, it's 18 to 24 months once you have a lot of learning. So how is the scenario for a battery company, sir? Like, I just wanted to understand, you are building a cell manufacturing facility, then you have to reach out to the customer, qualify the batteries. then scale it, or if you can give some
Sure.
ideas around it.
Sure.
That is
I
fine.
think let's first acknowledge that vehicle manufacturers are betting a lot on the battery suppliers because that becomes a significant portion of the cost component.
Yeah.
So it's quite natural, and we have to accept
Yeah.
the fact that they would like to invest significantly on qualifying a supplier.
Yes.
There's almost like finding a life partner.
Yeah.
They live with that.
Right.
You can't shift from one supplier to the other
Yes.
supplier because it's built into the core vehicle
Yeah.
architecture. Having said that, I think it's an important capability that each battery manufacturer has to build in terms of enabling customer qualification process.
Right.
And we have recognized that early on in our strategy, and we are building a customer qualification plant, which will be a bridge between what you develop in a research facility to what you take on to a mass scale manufacturing. So we are setting up a mega scale manufacturing facility. I would call it as a mega scale developmental facility, which is in normal language, we call it as a commercial pilot, but we call it as customer qualification plant, where a cell design proven in the lab is to be now manufactured under the standard manufacturing technology ecosystem, but not at the scale that you would do on a giga line. So this is a mega line. So customer is now assured that the product is being produced under similar conditions, similar process control, similar manufacturing technology parameters, and that product he can take it and get it tested in the vehicle, in the environmental testing or abuse testing or vehicle performance testing, and hence feel confident that okay, now this product can be taken onto the giga line. Of course, qualifying a product coming out of the giga line is a final step, but this will de-risk a lot of qualification risks associated with accepting the product. So we have recognized and we are investing significantly on that.
Thank you very much. I think this is very, very clear, right? And why I wanted to ask is this question is that many people are trying to understand and build understanding around these topics. So this is really very, very helpful, whether it is students or industry or even people in OEMs who are finding the battery suppliers.
Yeah.
So now customer qualification part is very, very clear, right? It's like you have almost a battery coming out in a real condition, so that finally there is no major goof up. I think that can be avoided through these customer qualification centers. And how big is the customer qualification center, sir, for your company?
What we are setting up is labeled as a 60 megawatt hour line, but I don't think capacity is as critical there. It's more about the versatility of this facility.
Why capacity is not critical, sir?
Because this is not meant to be for commercial production.
Yeah.
Capability is more important than capacity. While the equipment sizing has been done for 60 megawatt hour,
Right.
It's question of what that equipment can do, not how much, but what.
What?
So it is capable of multi-chemistry and multi-form factor, which means I can use multiple chemical recipes to produce the electrode, both anode and cathode. And I can also produce cells that are of either cylindrical form factor of different sizes or prismatic form factor of different sizes.
Okay.
We haven't yet considered pouch as an option yet, but the cylindrical and prismatic are our go-to choice. And this facility would be able to produce, typically in automotive parlance, it's called B sample. I can produce B samples, say the cylindrical or prismatic of different sizes, and I can produce them out of multiple chemistries. And we are ensuring that since this is a development facility, it's reasonably future proofed that 3 years down the line we don't get stuck saying that, oh, we forgot to build this capability in this. So we are making sure that that agility and the flexibility is built into this.
Right. And when it's like coming out for at a commercial level, then the sample is going to be C level, or
when you get on to the giga scale, it's the off tool, offline kind of product that you need to offer, which means that's the line and that's the tooling and that's the material you will use for mass manufacturing.
Right.
So if you don't have a commercial customer qualification plant and offer samples coming out of the giga line, the time it takes to get it qualified and the iterative process that you may have to go to prove it could be much more expensive. And you can crunch the time by using the bridge between a R&D product to a mass manufacturing product.
When I look at the numbers which your company has announced in public domain, I see that 5 gigawatt facility of the pack level, and then followed by 5 gigawatt of LFP chemistry by 2027, and then I think 16 earlier announcements were around 2027, but I guess it's now 2030. So if you can let us know about overall plan by considering one is the scale. Second, more important part is the battery chemistry and what form factors you are planning, whatever is it.
Sure. We have made an announcement to invest about $1.2 billion into creating a Giga Factory ecosystem. There are 3 components in that investment. One is about the developmental facilities, the research innovation facilities. We talked about that. We are investing close to about $120 million in that space. And we already have about 2.5 gigawatt hour of pack manufacturing capacity established with a healthy capacity utilization right now. And we have acquired about 260 plus acres of land near Hyderabad in a place called Divitipalli, which is about 90 kilometers from the city of Hyderabad. There we have established the first pack facility, which can eventually scale up to 5 gigawatt hour, which is what the earlier reference to. And we have announced a 16 gigawatt hour capacity to be established. But the land that we acquired will allow us to go beyond 30. But there is a formal approval from the board to establish 16 gigawatt hour in phase 1. And this itself will be done in multiple, tranches. The first effort is to set up the commercial qualification plant that I talked about. And the first Giga Factory will be cylindrical form factor, which the construction work has already commenced. When that plant fully matures, it will be close to 5 gigawatt hour. So the 5 gigawatt hour cell capacity that you referred to is only the cylindrical plant.
Only cylindrical.
Then there is a series of prismatic facilities that will come, and that would take us to 16 gigawatt hour by 2030. I think we continue to recalibrate these roadmaps based on what's evolving in the marketplace. When people talk about what's your estimate for 2030 market size, we keep revisiting those numbers every 6 months. Typically, companies do that once in a year, but there is so much of dynamics at play here that we keep revisiting those estimates every 6 months. And also the product configuration and the portfolio of cells that would be required, and the customer specific kind of mandates that we keep getting. All these things are factored to look at the capacity roadmap. But I'm pretty confident that the efforts that we are going in now will allow us to build both cylindrical and prismatic product portfolio in NMC as well as LFP chemistry, taking us close to about 20 gigawatt hour in the next 4-5 years.
And Vijayananji, the user segment, if I talk, the segment target segments, I guess in the beginning, they are going to be 2-wheelers and 3-wheelers, or your customer qualification facility is testing batteries for passenger cars and buses and trucks, all of them, or it's just focus on some particular segment?
Currently, as you know, the adoption of electric mobility is a lot more aggressive on the 2-wheeler side than on the 4-wheeler side. And understandably so, because the decision factor for a consumer to invest in a EV is a lot more affordable in a 2-wheeler than in a 4-wheeler. So as we speak, if you look at the import of cells being made for e-mobility application in India, it's dominated by 2-wheeler OEMs. But if one 4-wheeler OE program is, considered, that probably will be a much bigger number in terms of demand than the 2-wheeler segment. Interestingly, I'm seeing that adoption of e-mobility in the 4-wheeler segment is happening in the mid-size to top-end SUV segment, which is where aspirations are there, which is where customers are willing to, experiment, adopt. We have to closely watch whether this is the momentum created by early adopters or it's a momentum that will sustain. Now, investments and the plans of many of the OEMs in the marketplace gives the confidence that they are pretty, committed to this, and hence will look for supply chain partners in this space. So, yes, for a 2-3 year period going forward, two-wheelers may continue to be pulling the traction for demand for lithium cells. But if any of those four-wheeler programs mature to a certain level of scale
Right.
by more than 3-4 OEMs, I'm sure you will see the numbers will start getting dominated by the
Right.
four-wheeler traction. So Amara Raja is looking at creating a product portfolio that ladders to both two-wheelers, three-wheelers as the logistics, people and the cargo logistics supportive vehicles, as well as the four-wheelers.
Right. I was talking to Randhir Singh ji in one of my previous discussions, and I was trying to understand why there are some gaps when policymakers make the policy and what industry actually requires, and that was a very interesting discussion wherein I understood that when they were building the PLI scheme, they had to take care of few things, right, as a fundamental, because they are working fundamentally for the larger good of the people of India. So one, it has to be user agnostic, which means it cannot favor any particular vehicle segment, and it has also to be a technology agnostic. So they cannot, make a guess that okay, LFP is going to prevail in India, so let's only incentivize LFP. Fundamentally, they cannot do it because ultimately it has to, be working for a very long period of time because it needs cabinet approval and everything. And if you have to change the policy every time, it takes 2 years to change minimum. So user agnostics as well as the chemistry agnostics, or you can say the tech agnostics. That was the reason why cycle life and energy density became one of the key criteria. And based on that, a lot of companies they were able to attract companies bidding and eventually, announcing the capacities. Uh, I'm not sure. I mean, because if you look at the last 4 years, disbursements have not happened. Today morning, I was reading the news article. According to the news articles, it's not happened, which means obviously there is a slow growth because the target was 25% utilization within 2 years, 65% not utilization, the value addition by
The domestic value addition.
domestic value addition by 20 within 5 years. Which means there are challenges, right? But I think probably that became a trigger wherein other traditional companies, startups became more active. So overall, entire development is happening very fast. So first question to you on this topic is, how is the entire industry situation, Vijayanandji? Whether India is moving in the right direction by 2030, how much capacity India is going to create in terms of cell manufacturing, whether we are on the right path or not in terms of the overall industry. I understood the Amara Raja story.
Sure. A bit on the policy formulation. Many of us have been part of the dialogue, and Niti Aayog was at the forefront of leading the dialogue. Intent was very clear. Like you said, they wanted to be larger good of the society, larger good of the industry, larger good of the user community, and hence keep it as agnostic as possible. But what happened is you have multiple incentive programs that the government was driving.
Yes.
There was this FAME, which was early on, FAME 1, then FAME 2, and then now PME drive kind of a program. Then there was this PLI schemes, ACC PLI or Auto PLI. And there is also, state level encouragement.
Incentives, taxation, phase
manufacturing. What we have to look at is, are they complementary to each other? Now, when the technology matrix in ACC PLI came, like you said, in trying to make it agnostic, it was like a 4x4 matrix. You have cycle life versus energy density. And hence, when we closely looked at it, we found that there are only one or two sweet spots in that that would make sense from a market perspective.
Okay.
As against being able to be at the forefront of technology advancement. I know one of the conversation was about, we want to make it future proof. The energy densities are going up and cycle lives are going up. We don't want to incentivize a technology that will become obsolete soon. That.
Yes.
So at the same time, look at where FAME subsidy was given. FAME subsidy was not given for individually owned four-wheelers.
Right.
Whereas the technology matrix seemed to be focused more on creating an advanced performance cell that will actually go well with the individually owned SUV kind of a thing. Was the technology matrix looking at cells or products that will complement a two-wheeler, three-wheeler applications, which is where FAME subsidy was going? Was the technology of the cells defined they were going into, let's say, bus segment, which was where the FAME subsidy was going? We felt that they were not complementing each other. You have this 18,000 crores that is being, proposed for cell localization PLI, whereas there was 10,000 odd crores that was being proposed for FAME subsidy. So if you add up both, it should be adding up to 28,000 numerically. But is the 28,000 complementing each other? We felt there was a gap. So we felt that let the technology matrix be adopted by the cell makers in a manner that the market-driven product is what is built, rather than a matrix mandated, while it appeared to be agnostic on the face of it. So there was a challenge for us to look at what is the right sweet spot for which we can build the products, and that's narrowing it down. That's narrowing it down. Moving on further about whether the industry is in the right path. I think directionally we are in the right path. But if you ask me, are we moving fast enough? That's where I think there has been a bit of challenges on the timelines. That's true with us. That's true with companies that got shortlisted or selected for PLI scheme implementation, and companies that are investing beyond the PLI scheme as well. But I don't think it is so much about the policy aspect. It's more about the global dynamics. Right. Inherently, when you are setting up a Giga factory, there are these usually associated challenges of a mega project, land, core trunk infrastructure, and financing, all of that, which could be true with any other large-scale investment. But specifically to the Giga factory, it's about, is there enough definitiveness about the kind of product portfolio that you want to invest behind? Because there is certain amount of rigidity of, once you establish a capacity, how fungible can you make it? If you want to change the chemistry or change the form factor, what is the additional capex top up that you need to do to make that change? So I think there is a lot of thought that need to be given to see which way you are going, which product portfolio are you investing behind, which is governed and determined by what the consumers are looking for. So if 3 years ago I went to all the OEMs and asked, tell me what product you want, and now if I go and take the same input, there's been shifts on that, influenced by what's happening globally. So I think that recalibration seemed to be making sure that people wanted to understand which equipment should I get, what product line should I put in, all of that. Then the capacity scale up. I know early on our discussion, you talked about what the legacy companies late to join the bandwagon. If you were too early, then you will burn out. If you're too late, you will lose out. So somewhere along the line, you got to calibrate the timing also very well. Is the demand trajectory following the projections given, let's say, 5 years ago? In some segments, yes. In some other segments, no. So if I telescope forward and look at 2030, I'm of the opinion that the relative mix between a EV demand versus a ESS demand may keep shifting, because ESS comes out of a tendering process, a large project demand kind of a thing. So it comes in chunks, whereas EV is more driven by consumer adoption of mobility, e-mobility. So 2030, I might see that the demand could be around 100, 120 gigawatt hour, but not all of that can be catered to by locally made cells. The manufacturers like us have to pick and choose what cells we will make. So there is kind of a tail-end product portfolio, which will be lower in volume, very niche, that may still have to be imported. So if I assume that 70-75% of that 120 gigawatt hour has to be catered to by cell makers in India, we are looking at around 75-80 gigawatt hour of capacity would be required to be established in India. Are we in the trajectory on that? Maybe about 3-4 companies with a large capacity deployment, including us, would be part of that, players who would enable India to build a 75-80 gigawatt hour domestic capacity by 2030. I would have loved that to be 150 if going by the plans that the country was talking about 3 years ago. But 75-80 is not a bad beginning.
I think if really this happens, it's a good achievement according to me.
Absolutely.
And thank you very much for actually bringing out this perspective. I never really thought about it. Like, I have been trying to understand why policies work and why they don't work. But when FAME was there and then the PLI, ideally they should be formulated in one direction. And when I talk to some of the other battery manufacturers, I get a perspective also, like for a large battery company like yours, if you can set up the facility, you can bring the technology, you can find out a customer segment, and then you can sell them, you can get the financing, then generally investments really are not that, helpful. I mean, from schemes like PLI. So if you can do everything by your own, then I think it's
Yeah.
okay to work even without the policy support. But yes,
So,
ideally it
Pritesh,
has to
on
be in sync.
that, if I were to pick up, I think one of the things that people like you can help the industry to understand is do a mapping of what's the pricing at which people are able to import today,
Yeah.
and what would be the kind of cost structure India will offer
Yeah.
for a reasonably respectable project
Yeah.
of setting up Giga Factory,
Yeah.
considering all the dynamics associated with that, and establish a delta.
Yeah.
As a buyer of cells, I want the delta to be positive, which means if I say X for import, I want cell made in India to be X minus delta
Yeah.
X, right?
Yeah. Theoretically, yes.
But if you look at the supply chain players like us, we sense that it could be actually X plus delta X, not X minus delta X. So people, if they are looking at buying a locally made cell for cost benefit, it's unlikely to happen for some time. But then how much more you want to pay for a locally made cell and for what purpose? So what is the delta? Now, for any reason, if the delta X is something that the customers are unable to pay for and will continue to look at import as a choice, this is where the policy has to play. The lowest hanging fruit of creating that, bridging the gap could be a tariff structure, right? The government did talk about phased manufacturing program and enhancing the tariffs when local capacity appears, other thing. But we also have to look at the financial model and say, where is that cost pain point for investors in India?
Right.
How do I mitigate cost pain point? Upfront capex sometimes is pretty risky. Just because you can afford to spend money doesn't mean people will spend money.
Yeah.
They want to see whether that money is worth spending. So if you provide a little bit of de-risking approach to that upfront capex in the form of capital subsidy or whatever it is, it might trigger a little more, acceleration of the capacity ramp up. PLI takes care of, incentivizing what is manufactured, right? And then you are choosing who you want to incentivize that based on certain criteria. So somewhere we ought to bring in this understanding of if there is a delta between an imported cell versus a domestically made cell, what's the quantification of the delta most likely, and how do we ensure till the delta disappears based on the natural competitiveness of the local industry, which will take time. How do we ensure that the delta risk is mitigated?
Right. So for this risk mitigation part, Vijayananji, like there can be a viability gap funding kind of a scheme, or what sort of support government can think of going forward, because policy making is a evolving subject, right?
Yeah.
And they need to decide what is working, what is not working, and keep, because everybody is in a learning phase, including manufacturers, car companies, even consumers, government. So is it VGF is the right one? Or?
I think VGF is what is already proposed and is in action for the energy storage projects, because it's project-based funding.
Yeah.
So if somebody says, I got to put in 3,000 crores for setting up a particular energy storage project, but for me, it's not working out. If it is 2,500, maybe there is a business case there.
Right.
Then government say, okay, I'm going to bridge that. That's a viability gap funding. But for a manufacturing ecosystem to evolve, VGF may not be a very effective tool unless you see how do I mitigate the capex risk. Because cash flow, how long can you have a negative cash flow in a project model? And hence, how do you see that negative cash flow turns into at least, a break-even cash flow at some point of time? Because ultimately, the funding agencies will look for that. How long do you need to continue to burn money? Now, there could be, other ways of funding it through equity premiums and all of that. But we know that over the last 2-3 years, that equity premiums are rationalized now, and hence investors are not going to pay a huge premium on that. So my view is that if you look at the financial model, look at the financial risk associated with both the capex and the associated interest burden on that.
Right.
And if there is a way government can step in there saying that, okay, you're going to have a significant depreciation component, you're going to have a significant interest component, till the capacities reach certain level of scale efficiency
Right.
and utilization reaches a healthy level, these two components can be addressed. So leave the responsibility to an organization to manage their EBITDA, but EBITDA to become a margin, you have these depreciation and interest components that can be addressed through certain kind of a incentive scheme. I think the funding agencies will feel very comfortable about that.
Very interesting. Now, because we are talking about, de-risking the investment, let us also talk about the de-risking of the supply chain. So I think the obvious topics, right? If you look at the cell, we all know it's anode, cathode, electrolyte, separators, current collectors, and then housing. And the cost contribution is maximum for your cathodes, followed by anode and separator, maybe 10 to 15% each, and then housing, current collectors, etc., 10%. And cathode goes around 35, 40%, 5%. I'm referring one of the recent reports. Now, and if you look at this global scenario, from China especially, we sometimes get indications that the cathode technologies probably are restricted. Even in 2023, I think they restricted the export permits for graphites, and so many other clues keeps coming, right, depending on the geopolitical situation. So, and then we are trying, to address this, right? And it's like addressing some challenge on which we have very limited control. So let's say if we don't have the lithium and somebody else has the lithium, then we have limited control on addressing those kind of challenges, right? So your overall idea around de-risking of the supply chain, entire supply chain, and then maybe I want to ask you till when we are going to buy anodes and cathodes from outside, what can be the timeline when we have an opportunity in India? I think that will be very useful.
This is a very involved and engaging topic. Let me see how I can simplify it and look at it from three buckets.
Yes, sir.
First bucket I want to see is what's the global capacity today? And in the long-term planning, how many multiples of current demand is likely to happen? Let's say a 10-year period.
Okay.
Globally, right? I know there's been a bit of moderation that happened over the demand plan, but the electrification of mobility is an irreversible phenomena. So the topic of de-risking supply chain is very involved and engaging, and we can spend a lot of time. But let me see how I can simplify it, and I look at it from three buckets. First one is where are we today, and in a 10-year frame, how this industry is going to scale up. I'm not talking about India, even the global context, because supply chain is about de-risking on the global dynamics. Say even if you are at around the 1500 gigawatt hour kind of demand today, there have been earlier projections where it will go up to 7 terawatt hour, 8 terawatt hour. So it's likely to scale up multi-fold from where we are. So I don't think we have seen the end of it yet in terms of the demand scale up. So even if a part of the demand is going to be met by recycling, we still have 3-4 times of current demand to be bridged with new material that need to come into the ecosystem. While a significant amount of respect and credibility to what China has done over the last couple of decades on this, we still are talking about 70 to 75% of new demand to be created, and hence new material to come into the system, new virgin material to come into the system. So I don't think, I want to give up on that globally, right? I don't think we discovered all the mines for lithium. Or I don't think capacities for metal processing have been established to meet, future demand 10 years from now. And I don't think that the specialty chemical industry has been restricted to China classically. India has a strong chemical industry. Europe traditionally has a very strong chemical industry. I think it's more of cost competitiveness rather than a technology challenge. Yes, there are certain IPs held by Chinese companies, and hence China want to leverage any when I'm pushing the boundaries on technology performance, they want to leverage first with the Chinese players, Chinese OEMs before it's made available to, and that's natural. That the first mover advantage should be enjoyed by them. But I think there's a lot more play that is available for people to de-risk on that.
Right.
The second bucket is about, what's the kind of material recipe that we want to play, one from an application perspective and the other one from the supply chain risk perspective. So we got to probably look at if it's something is seriously, risked on access to that material, what are the alternatives that we have? Or if not alternatives, how do I enhance efficiency per unit of usage that we do? That's, I think, that we will continue to look for that.
Right.
And of course, the third thing that is about is India need to invest on processing capability. Even if mineral availability is a natural incidence and there's nothing we can undo about it, continue to look for natural resources that could be, made available in India. Why I'm saying that is, let's look at copper and aluminum, which goes into electrodes.
Yeah.
Right? We have abundant access to copper and aluminum.
Right.
It's a question of making a battery grade the foils for electrode manufacturing.
Right.
What is stopping us from getting there? Again, there it's not that IP is very tough to overcome. We just need to be ahead of on the innovation curve.
Right.
Electrolyte recipes are not that difficult to make.
Yeah.
Separator can be definitely looked at. I think it's more of cost competitiveness challenge rather than strategic risk issue there. That's how I look at the supply chain. So my optimism is that as we go along, as the demand in India goes up, we will be able to crack that. And thankfully, at least in the last couple of weeks, we are seeing some little bit of positivity being heard about India-China relationships. So hopefully, the political dispensation on both sides will see the strength of India and China rather than India or China.
Yeah, I think it cannot be India or China. I think China, we must respect that they are far ahead, and they have all credits to them.
Absolutely.
And we can learn also, and then try to catch up. It's not a race between whether India or China, in my opinion.
True.
And as you rightly mentioned, that it's not only the production, right? It's about the processing technology. So, for example, in graphites, 70% production capability they have, whether it is natural or synthetic, but they have the 90% control on the technology.
Right.
So we must, and I think we have done in other areas, especially let's say oil, we have oil refineries and this processing. So we can do that. I think there we can focus. And I hope within, let's say 5 years at least, India can get the capability to supply anodes and cathodes as well.
I'm very positive, at least on the anode. Cathode may take a little longer, depending upon what cathode chemistry that India will narrow down to as a predominant chemistry.
Right.
If it is LFP or LMFP kind of chemistry, we'll have to continue to work on how do we ensure. As again I said, is it about availability challenge or is it about competitiveness challenge? The competitiveness challenge is going to be probably more important for us to solve. In my view, a political will and the industry agility will solve the competitiveness challenge as well.
One more important topic, Vijayanandji, I wanted to discuss with you is about talent availability, right? Generally speaking, we always like to say that India has a very large and good talent pool. At the same time, if you look at the nature of IT industry, we are just outsourcing in majority of the cases. Obviously, we are developing the capability on the core technologies. But when something like lithium-ion battery comes, you really need, PhDs and resources which you can deploy on certain technology development or technology adoption maybe. That is one part. And then OEMs need their own kind of people. Then at the downstream supply chain dealerships, you need talent pool which is trained a little bit. Being at this a new field, do you think currently there are challenges across the value chain, and whether India is preparing itself?
Yeah, I think talent availability is one of the 6 different challenges that we have identified almost 6-7 years ago, and you have brought up that point very clearly. There is no short-term solution to this, right? When we go to institutions for recruiting people, even for the other functions, one of the challenge we find is that there is a general preference to certain more attractive career opportunities that students do have access to, either on the IT side or banking, finance, management consultancy, all premier institutions,
Yeah. Focus on.
sharp, smart minds in the engineering field still choose to go
Yeah.
there. So we realized that there are two solutions to that.
Mm.
I'm not saying from a just Amara perspective, but this probably is applicable for the country as a whole. One is to attract talent back to India, those who have actually spent some time in this sector.
Okay.
We were partially successful on that to be able to bring people back to India, those who have spent 5 years, 10 years in this sector. May not have a shop floor experience in terms of running a Giga factory, which is limited to Korea and China and few parts of Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
But definitely on the product development, project management, chemistry, research, we have been able to get few people back to India. That's one way to solve. And they become kind of a rallying point or a role model for the other people around to, build. The second one is to actually invest in building the talent. We do collaborate with some of the academic institutions and talking to them to build a postgraduate program in advanced energy technologies. So I think we need to get that specialized knowledge and expertise built as a collaborative mode. And Amara Raja can do so much, but if all industries start associating, which I believe they are doing, then we should be able to get the specialist talent built in collaboration with academic institutions. And of course, we do a lot of in-house training programs. So as I said in the beginning, it's not something that you can solve overnight, but you got to keep investing on skill building in this sector. I'm happy to note that actually looking at, the way some of the social media engagements that I have, the awareness, the knowledge, and the willingness to engage with this sector is actually growing manifold.
Yeah, that's true.
From young people.
Yeah.
And this is one technology, just to, kind of round up this point, where it's a convergence of multiple disciplines.
Yeah.
You're not a mechanical engineer, you're not an electrical engineer, and the digital technologies in terms of applying the physics-based modeling and the AI tools. Then the plant management requires something. There are a lot of electrochemistry that flows into that. It's a lithium or advanced energy storage technologies. There's very nice confluence of multidisciplinary.
And also, it's not a mature technology, if I may say so. So, for students who are entering into this subject field, maybe career opportunity, there are going to be very interesting,
Absolutely.
areas of work which they can, explore at least another 15 years. So that is also one of the attractive points.
I know a student or a PhD research scholar working in IIT Madras on computational fluid dynamics and applying those principles to lithium cell modeling.
Yeah, I think I need minimum 5 hours to have a conversation with you, but we have to close it. But before we close, I would like to take your opinion on is there any possibility of, other future chemistries? Because sodium ion is talked a lot, metal air, solid state, semi-solid state. So what is beyond lithium which can come in future?
I think, for somebody who came from lead acid background to lithium over the last 5-6 years that I'm deeply engaged with, when I look at the periodic table and see how many of those elements are engaged with lead acid technology, and then look at lithium and say how many more elements are getting engaged with lithium technology, I see that, there are something like 22 elements that are associated with lithium technology per se, as against maybe 7 or 8 in the lead acid side. And the high velocity modeling techniques that are available using digital methods, data mining, data processing that were done by some of the research entities seem to bring in a lot of possibilities. For example, lithium sulfur is being talked about. And one of the most exciting applications for me is about electric aviation. Drones, right? Starting from a Shadiwali drone, as the people talk about, to military drones, to people transportation, aviation solutions. The battery performance requirements there are very different. So I'm assuming that it's not be one silver bullet that will solve all the problems. While lithium family will continue to play a significant role to go forward with. Sodium ion is on the horizon to look at, maybe at least to start with stationary applications. Earlier I thought cycle life is a challenge, but now people talk about significant enhancement on cycle life. So even if energy density is a bit of a limitation on sodium ion, stationary applications can leverage that. Low temperature performance is a big plus for sodium ion. And then there is a lithium sulfur, which has very high energy density. People are talking about, lithium metal anode kind of a thing. So there will be continuous innovation to push the boundaries on the specific performance characteristics. And I don't think we are going to see lithium fade away, but few of these bright sparks coming in and solving specific problems. So that way, I know it's a pretty exciting future where you see, people pushing the boundaries and make what is typically seen as unthinkable maybe a decade ago becoming a reality as we go forward.
Interesting. Continuous innovation, I think, is the key word. Thank you very much, Vijayanandji, for joining the show. I hope people watch it and get benefit out of it. So today we discussed, how lead acid battery manufacturing, large manufacturer has transformed and, trying to build capability around lithium-ion battery manufacturing and solve problems around the entire part of the value chain. We also talked about, some very interesting, discussions about policies, how to bring a policy which actually supports the entire ecosystem building, just not working in the silos. Then we went into deeper, understood the realistic challenges and opportunities for India around the supply chain, and it was encouraging to understood that there are things which India can do well. Then in the end, we also talked about talent pool availability and idea of Vijayanand sir on how India can do better and some of the improvement areas, and also very interestingly on the battery chemistry future roadmap. I'm sure this session is going to be very, very useful. So please watch it and keep looking for other sessions. Thank you very much. Stay tuned.